2. Okay, this is Child Development 202 and 205. We're going to today do a speed read walkthrough of Unit 2, which is 5, 6, 9, and 11. Because the lectures are already in there, let's do some guided reading today. Sounds good? Good. All right, so let's start with Chapter 5, Speech and Language. Now, for the students that are on today, just jump in when you have a question. I'm going to kind of read through each page a little bit, not every word, but I'm also going to bring your attention to some things that are really important and probably on the test, quiz, whatnot. So I like how our book shows like features people who have things like whatever, speech and language or learning disabilities. I understand that that Samuel L. Jackson also has ADHD, but he talks about he had stuttering. And so still, I understand that even when he's working right now, he still has issues remembering things or focusing, but stuttering is a big deal. I mean, and kids can be cruel. And so a lot of people who do have a stutter, sometimes they do go into creative arts. They could sing beautifully, or they sometimes end up being quiet, but they also can draw and do art and things like that. So I really do like how they talk about celebrities who we've all come to know and love. So learning outcomes, our book always talks about outcomes. I mean, because why talk about, like, it's basically having a roadmap with no destination. So again, the outcomes always start and they kind of look at the same. There's always like, let's describe what this is and how does special education fit into that? Let me see chat. Oh, yay, someplace viola, Cheryl, yay. I love it. And then people and situations, we're going to learn about what people and what situations this might be common with, and then future perspectives. I think that's great too. Always like not just talk about the heaviness of what a disability is or what it looks like or how it shows up, but look about the future. What's next? You know, do we have technology on the horizon? This future perspective does talk about technology. And so let me keep going here. And again, I'm using thevitalsource.com to rent my books. Again, people, you can get your books anywhere, but I just decided to get the lifetime access here. Okay, so just this section of speech and language impairments described, it has to, we want to talk about the difference between a speech impairment and a language impairment. Sometimes people just lump them all together and say speech impairment, right? So there is, and this kind of gives us like the table of contents for the rest of the chapter. So 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, right? So we'll talk about the definition, the types and characteristics, prevalence, and placement. Every chapter has this breakdown: defined, types, characteristics, prevalence, and placement. You'll see that. Yeah, that's so cute. All right, so again, speech and language usually shows up with the younger people at first. So right, when we have a 2-year-old who's just learning how to speak, you'll see some issues here, but we don't be like, oh my gosh, you're so disabled, you don't speak right. No, they're 2. They're 2. Not until we get into more like the 2nd grade and things haven't sort of evened out, maybe, that we can see where the one is an issue. Now, again, let's take a step back. Speech and language issues are surmountable, meaning like we can get by with them, right? And here's the thing, nobody's looking for perfection. What this book doesn't tell you is that when you get into the classroom setting or in the ABA setting, nobody's saying you have to get 100% of your speech and language trials perfectly, because not even a native English speaker who's an adult, who's moderately caffeinated and well slept and well fed has perfect English. So we are looking for a common approximation, meaning can 80% of the words come out of a person's mouth that we can understand, that anybody can understand? So if there's a stutter, but it's very slight, they might not qualify for services. It might just be a 504, which is fine. If there is a stutter that the person can barely get any words out at all whatsoever, you know, when you say, do you want hamburger? And they can't even say yes, then that's a big deal. That's more than 80%, right? So again, I mentioned earlier, my aunt had Down syndrome and she was in speech services. She had very slurry speech. She had very garbly, mushy speech, but I understood her, you know, the whole family understood her, but other people couldn't. So if she needed help or if she needed to order a hamburger, she couldn't do it. So there's a thing where, again, any disorder, whether it's this chapter or any chapter, if it's super duper mild and it's not causing a significant impairment in the classroom, it might not qualify for full IEP. Okay, so the definition of speech and language impairments is that, again, when it says negatively influence, if it's mild and it doesn't influence, then you're okay. So speech disorders have to do with the physical part of the mouth. Language has to do with maybe I don't know the language. So like if my son didn't know how to roll his R's, and I was like, well, he's part Mexican. How come he can't roll his R's? My friends were like, you have to teach that. I was like, oh, okay. I thought it was a mechanics, but still to this day, he doesn't have full mechanics of his mouth. At 15, he's learning how to blow out candles like this. It takes so many different muscles to produce sounds. Even until you're about 8 or 9 years old, you can't say or some of these very high level sounds in the mouth. And so, yeah, he would always blow out candles like this. He didn't have this. Quite frankly, I bought him a trombone, and now he can blow like that. Yes, I've had to take trombone in the air. So again, there's 2 ways that 3 ways that communication breaks down. Check this out. Let's say you're learning a different language. That's an easy way to understand it. So let's say I'm trying to order a taco at El Pollo Loco, and I'm saying El Polo Loco. I think we can kind of get what I'm saying. However, if I'm trying to order things, like I'm in Mexico and I'm ordering things in Spanish, but I'm pronouncing it wrong, right? If I incorrectly produce the speech, how is that person going to understand me? What if I was a native Spanish speaker and I was ordering in Spanish and I still had an incorrect production? Doesn't mean that person's going to receive the message properly. Okay. Now, also, me as a sender, I could use the language incorrectly. So I could say my syntax backwards. I could say something like, instead of saying, may I borrow your pencil, I could say, pencil, I borrow, may I? That's a type of a brain little hiccup, right? And if it's just one hiccup, that's one thing. We can sometimes correct ourselves. But if it's constantly backwards like that, that's going to be confusing to the person, to the receiver, right? The last issue is the receiver. Maybe there's something wrong with their ears or their brain. It's not understanding. Maybe you're speaking to them perfectly, but they're not understanding it. So there's 3 ways that communication can go wrong. And by the way, happens inside of families all the time with typically developed people. Again, with our book, it'll give us like the definitions on these highlighted words. So speech impairments is the physical like connection of speech, making the sounds. Okay. Language is whether I'm using the words wrong or putting them in the backwards order, taking the rules of our language and messing those up. So again, here is what I mean by speech. All of these different sections could be something that's wrong. So think of this as like your car engine. Like, so when a mechanic opens your car engine and is trying to figure out what's going on, do they just first of all point and laugh at your engine and say, oh, well, you stuttered, haha, you're weird? No. It tries to figure out, is it stuttering because of this? Is it stutter the carburetor or the timing belt or the radiator, right? So for us, we have this respiratory system. We've all heard this before. It's the breathing part, right? If you're not breathing, you cannot produce sounds. Have you ever been like talking with somebody, or you're talking and you're trying to get a last parts of a sentence out and it sounds like this? It's got to ran out of air. Yeah, there's no air. The sounds will not come through because you have to resonate here. It's like an accordion, right? Number 2, you have the vibrating system. So put your hand on your throat and say your name, say anything. So this is the vibrating system. This is when you have a sore throat or you have laryngitis. It's inflamed. It's not vibrating properly. So that just includes vocal folds and larynx. The resonating system is actually, this is like your subwoofer and your woofer, right here, your nasal cavities, mouth and throat. So you have met people who are really soft first, and they just don't have really good resonating system. Maybe they're ones, but really they're not really speaking up. So if you couldn't hear me, I have a pretty decent resonating system. My mother-in-law, when she yells at her dog, she's like this: Baxter, Baxter, Baxter. I'm like, yo, Baxter, right? So I have a big resonating system, and I vibrate here. And then the speech mechanisms are the actual parts of the mouth the tongue, the lips right here, the soft palate, which is above up here, way in the back. Hard palate is right in the middle up. Your teeth and lips and tongue and jaw. These are the things that put our language together. Now, if somebody has a cleft palate, has a lisp, has a stutter, maybe has had some surgery, has, again, that soft palate can be inflamed from tonsillitis. What about with somebody's with their jaws wired shut, right? People have cut their tongues, split their tongue. People have tongues, they don't have tongues at all. So there's all of these, every single one of these things could be something that needs to be troubleshooted or fixed or adjusted or put together with therapy to produce language at an 80% approximation. Does that make sense? So again, think of this as like a machine or a car. There could be one thing that's like, maybe like, so I could tell you when I back out of the space over here, my back brakes are a little squeaky, but does that really make my car unsafe? Not really. If I was backing up down a big hill, maybe, right? So I'll get that checked next time, right? So it could be the same thing as this is allergy season. We're all like kind of drippy and sniffy and, hitting, I have a friend of mine, she's like, I got sick and I tested myself for COVID 3 times. I was like, allergies, babe, allergies. So just know that you're going to have parts of the body that could need adjusting, or it could be a neurological thing too. So there's, again, speech is how we produce speech. Language is our rules of language. So you're going to talk, these are these different types of impairments. Now, I did put in the module all these different videos in there. Not 100% all of them, but most of them. So let me go through if I can. Articulation. So substitution would be like, instead of saying I went to the store, it would be like not like I went to the store, but I go to store yesterday. Like I substitute. And it's okay. Well, we can teach children how to say like the proper tense of things. Sometimes there's just a substitution. Sometimes it's a really awkward word or a random word. And you're like, okay, they're just substituting one word for another word. We could work on that. Omission is, instead of saying I went to the store, it said I store, right? We can work on that, right? And again, speech is something that just gets polished as we're little and as we go forward, right? So how many times when you were little or you have little ones, you say, no, we said, instead of I go to the store, no, I went to the store. So we do a lot of modeling and correcting, and it's fine. But again, if we're talking about like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and these things are still happening, we'll talk. Distortions is when they take a word and say, I went to the store, or stall. They kind of make a part of that word big or something. They kind of make it. And then additions. I went to the store. They add something at the end, right? And so we can just, again, polish that gem, right? Fluency is stuttering and cluttering. I've noticed a lot more cluttering. Stuttering, we were all pretty familiar with, and there's a cute video in the module of kids stuttering. But the cluttering is when you hear a bunch of words in a row and like a little bit of a pause, and then like a bunch more words in a row. And sometimes it sounds like somebody's thinking. And again, the words may be coming out. They're just in an interesting tempo. That is definitely work on. We can work on it. All of these can be worked on in speech therapy. Voice is pitch. Some people have a really high pitch. Some people have a really intense pitch. Some people, their voice, they don't really like pronounce the word really clearly. So sometimes the phonation, their tongue is off, or it's maybe a lisp or something like that. Resonance would be somebody who carries their voice like really loud. Sometimes people are loud speakers. You'll notice that with kids with autism. Sometimes when they're getting bombarded with other stimuli, they try to talk over the stimuli. And it's just the air conditioner. It's not like it's loud in the room. It's just like the air conditioner is throwing them off. So all these things can be worked on in speech therapy. Again, my son is hyperverbal, but he does get speech therapy for some of these things. Like he's a loud talker because he's got other sensory issues and things like that. And also a lot of his mouth was not fully formed. I mean, formed, but it just took a long time. So characteristics, like, again, they don't technically cause speech and language. If you're receiving speech and language is fine from a teacher, you should be fine. But again, how many times in school do the teachers expect students to talk, right? So again, receptive language is receiving the language, and sending the language. So this is, what do I call it? You could have students or children with receptive delays or a production delay. So I know a lot of teenagers, there's a lot of what, and my husband's always like, what, why is he always saying what? I'm like, well, he's got a receptive communication delay since he was 8. Like, just repeat what you said. I mean, it's like, yes, teenagers do that too, but at the same time, he could be hearing the teacher and it just takes him an extra second and then she's already moved on. So sometimes those things get in the way. So we have to make sure that's what the accommodation is, right? That we're not going to tell a teacher to repeat themselves, but sometimes they need to, or give it in a different way. So I can tell you, even in college, even with adults, we are so distracted. We are so over bombarded with information. We're just, we can't focus. And so I will say the same thing 3 different times sometimes, especially when it comes to like the late policy. I was like, I don't take points off for late work. I don't take points off for late work. I don't take points off for late work. Sometimes by the 3rd time, people are like, wait, she doesn't take point off for late work. Yeah, it's especially when something's super new. You're like, wait, I can't even process that. What did you say? Right. So there's a lot of different ways that we can reinforce ourselves, right? How do language impairments affect communication? Let's say a child is 100% silent in the classroom and they're receiving everything they need to know from their teacher, and they're a good student. But when they go out to the playground, they don't really talk to their friends, so they don't really have friends. So again, that's not the classroom setting, but that could cause distancing in the classroom setting. So expressive language is expressing themselves, receptive language is receiving the information. And again, if the receptive language delay has to do with just listening, let's get those ears checked. If the ears are fine, then it's not the mechanics of the ears. It's something from the ears to the brain. And sometimes that could be aphasia, that could be intellectual disability, things like that. So again, this next piece, pragmatics, is pretty big. Pragmatics is something that we all have-ish, but we don't really ever talk about it. But this is super important, especially as we go forward into autism and things like that, ADHD. Pragmatics is where it just says right here, it says necessary for social interactions. It doesn't tell you what it is. I think they should have defined pragmatics. Pragmatics is knowing the right thing to do in the right situation. So when it comes to language, pragmatic language means knowing to talk one way on the playground than you do in the classroom differently. So the playground's like, hey, throw me the ball. You don't say that in the classroom. You don't say to the teacher, hey, throw me a pencil. No, you don't do that. Or would you speak to your grandmother the same way you would speak to a best friend? No. So pragmatics is something that it's housed right here in the frontal lobe. And with kids with ADHD and sometimes autism, this is the last thing to be developed, especially preemies, where it's literally the last part of our bodies to be developed. And so it can be underdeveloped. And so, yeah, my son does have issues with pragmatics. He likes to whine with me, and then he's at high school, so he's trying on swear words, and then he'll try to whine and use swear words with the teacher. I was like, bro, you need to pick these battles better. And so I even will talk to him. I'm like, if you're going to use swear words, where's the best place to use those? With me? No. With your friends? Yeah. With the teachers? No. So you have to kind of teach pragmatics a little bit. Communicative competence is knowing how to talk in a classroom versus how to talk in the playground or on the weekend or with family or friends and things like that. So so things like initiating and maintaining conversations. Kids with autism will just go off on tangents because it popped into their head. Interpreting body language and facial expressions. I have to literally tell my son, if you're talking with somebody, you're interested in talking with them, have your feet point to them. And by the way, if somebody's talking to you and their feet are not pointing at you, they don't really want to talk to you. And that's okay. And so now he goes, oh, I noticed that your feet are pointing that way. Would you like to leave? That's okay. So you can teach them about pragmatics very rote wise, like very like boilerplate. I don't know how to say that. Just like, this is how you do it. And sometimes they will like put it in. So again, things like common social customs, he's very great with those things. He's learned. Hello. Good to see you. What is your name? Do you have a dog? Like before he goes off on a tangent. And then so things like this is pragmatic language. If this guy, his back is turned, he doesn't see a shark, and this guy says, wow, a big fish. Well, he's not wrong, right? So the better thing would say, hey, there's a shark. So a lot of times with my son, he'll say, look over there at that thing. Over where? At what thing? He's like, over there. I'm like, point. And then he's like, kind of like flails. What am I looking at? He's like, that classic car over there. I'm like, okay, that took 3 times, but use that at the beginning. So we're getting better at those things. Now, also, culture has a lot to do with speech and language. Again, I'm learning Spanish. Let's see. Yo tengo 388 días in Duolingo. And so, but that's all I can really say. But I know that syntax is different, and there's things like we would say el baseball versus baseball and things like that. So when somebody's learning a new language, we don't say they have a speech and language disorder. Look, English is hard. We make up rules and then we turn around and change them. We borrowed half of our words from other languages, and then we put 2 words together, like hangry. Like, come on. So you can't say if somebody's a multi-language learner or a dual language learner that they have a speech impairment. They don't. They don't. If they have all the mechanics perfectly fine, again, the resonation, the vibration, all the pieces, fine. They're just not used to the language. If they're putting things in wrong orders, we're not saying that they have a pragmatic deficit. We're saying that's just syntax and practice, right? So again, we have to be culturally competent, especially when it comes to speech and language. So again, teachers can figure it out if it's the same issue across the board from, like, let's say a student's learning Japanese, or a student speaks Japanese as their first language and they're learning English. If they have a lisp, they're going to have it in Japanese and in English, right? So that's more of like a structural issue, right? But if they're putting their words in different orders, that's just a syntax and pragmatic change. It just takes a minute to learn those things. Again, inconsistent means there might be something else going on there. It could be a brain issue. Sometimes there's like tumors or aphasia or brain injury or brain trauma. Prevalence of placement. So this is pretty big. Speech and language is usually the first one that shows up, because when kids are little, you see speech and language. But it says right here, it's the largest category of 3 to 5-year-olds. But wait a minute, we said learning disability is the largest category. Right, because 3 to 5-year-olds aren't in a learning capacity right now. They're not doing sentences and paragraphs and reading, not yet, right? So they're not really academic. So the learning disabilities show up when it gets more academic, right? So it's interesting because, and then right here it says the federal government tallies students by their primary category only. So if somebody has a learning disability and speech, whatever one's more prohibitive, the bigger issue or bigger challenge. So if somebody has a learning disability and a speech disorder will go secondary. And then they'll kind of only count this as LD. So even though we see LD, learning disabilities, as the biggest category, in there's a big overlap for speech, but LD kind of gets the spotlight. Make sense? And again, as children get older, some of these speech issues go away. As they learn the language, you get more comfortable and go to speech therapy and things like that. So again, where students with speech and language issues are educated, what setting? Mostly general education classroom. So they could be in the class most of the time, again, have an 80% approximation of speech, but every once in a while they're pulled out, right? Or there's a push in to their classroom. But again, kids with, a speech and language issue, home or hospital, very, very rare. It's usually in addition to something else. Good, makes sense. Okay, so if somebody really needs has a disability with speech or language, they may need other alternative texts, right? So again, students who get services there, they may need services through their lifetime. They may just need it when they're little. It may sometimes stutters come on with anxiety. So again, it kind of depends on what the student needs. But again, this particular thing right here, this chart is important. I will ask you on a quiz or test, which disability category, speech or language, or LD shows up first? I want to hear from the group.
Speech,
Yes, why?
because well, the learning disabilities are identified when they start, like preschool, when they start reading. That's when it's noticeable.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. Perfect. So I know sometimes you have a book and it's like in black and white. So you'll this first one is red. So you'll see this interesting thing here, like when they're like at 3 is kind of when we start to maybe identify, but speech and language at 3 is already way up here because you can kind of tell, right? So when they're 3, speech and language is a lot more evident than the learning disabilities. What would show us for a possible red flag in a LD for a 3-year-old is that they can't maybe pick out their first letter of their name. Their name is Brenda and they can't pick out a B, even though there's like bees all over their room, you know, things like that. So, or things like they don't really respond to things that like pre-literacy activities, or they might like the book, but they don't really look at the book. They're not, or maybe they're not even engaged. There's certain things at 3 that you can kind of identify, but speech and language, because most 3-year-olds do talk. By the age of 3, about, you know, there's about 3,000, 5,000 words. By 2, it's about 2,000 words. And so you'll know if a 3-year-old's not even talking, that's a speech issue, not a learning disability. Right? But you can have kids who are super, super duper silent, learning just fine. So make sure you know this one. This will show up for sure on the quiz or test. And then again, so special education for these students, again, sometimes it changes, sometimes it stays, but I like how the book talks about, this is like the overview. It talks about the challenges and their solutions. And I like the little graphic that they use. It's like a little circle with the thing in the bottom. Okay. So challenges and their solutions. So here's the general characteristics we already talked about. Misarticulation. They're just saying things wrong. I go to the store. That's addition. Disfluencies is like a stutter or clutter. Poor voice quality or poor resonance. Sometimes you just get a little baby to talk really. And sometimes the parents are like, oh, my little angel, she just doesn't like to talk. You're like, right? Or sometimes the preemies have like little squeaky voices. There's like little petite children forever with, sometimes they have glasses and they still have baby voices. It's really sweet. But are they able to communicate and get along in society? If yes, great. If not, let's work on it. So the challenges are the production, the reluctance to speak, frustration, or withdrawn from social behavior. Not having friends or not being able to play dress up or whatever with your peers at kindergarten and preschool, it's a big deal. We want to get children socially competent, even if they're having a hard time to talk. But again, it's kind of cute because you'll get 4-year-olds who say, my friend doesn't talk so good, but she's still my friend, which is great. So that's how we kind of include those social emotional skills. So accommodations are different for everybody. Again, so my son also has, we'll talk about this in LD, he has dysgraphia, he can't write very well. I'll see if I can get you guys pictures of his stuff that he gives me. I keep it all, looks like a 5-year-old, but I love it. And so an alternate response to the assignment. So if a child is not so good at talking, maybe you give them a picture with pointing, right? Do you know, like all restaurants like McDonald's, they have like menus that are just point menus for people who don't know the language, or maybe had a stroke and can't speak or whatever, right? AAC is something you're going to see here in our class, one of the acronym, millions of acronyms, but AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. You can have an iPad with not Duolingo, Proloquo on it, or some speech to text to speech, and communications board. These are a little bit older. Communication boards are symbol communication boards like PECS, where you see a picture and the student points to it. That's absolutely okay. It just depends on what kind of speech and language issue they have. Visuals are always great. Most creatures are visual, like most animals are, like we are. Repetition, simplification, and cues. Sometimes as adults, we talk too much. Like I talk a lot. And I've also heard people say, oh, you might want to think about going to sit down in this circle with your friends, okay? Time to sit down. See the difference? You know, you're not being extra bossy, you're keeping it simple. Less is more in a lot of ways. So again, these are presentation setting, response, and scheduling timing issues. So if you have like anybody who needs a vocabulary test, maybe this is an accommodation and modification in a 504. They just get the vocabulary list early. My friend did that with her son. It helped. Simplifying direction, verbal cues. So my son gets a daily report where he's getting gestures, verbal cues, or something else. I'll have to show you guys what it looks like. Sometimes he can respond to or a point on his, hey, focus, right? Or it has to be like, hey, get over here and sit down and work on your stuff. I mean, he is 15. We don't have to talk super simple. But again, alternate setting, he has to, maybe there's a quiet, it's better for a student to have a quiet setting or preferential seating, meaning right in the front. Alternative response options. My son has a scribe. So if he's trying to type something, or no, he can't write it really fast, like on an exam, even if he could write it well, you can't read it. So now he can type it, but sometimes he gets, what's the word? Overwhelmed, and then he can't type. So then they have an accommodation modification that he can audio type, or he can have a scribe. Scheduling or timing, extended time on tests, exams, assignments, and then a visual schedule. A visual schedule helps most people, like this time, yeah. So again, it depends on what the student needs and the IEP determines, right? Again, so these are some tips here. If a child is not great at expressing themselves, talk less and have them talk more. Tell me more about that. What color was it? Can you describe it to me? And just be present with them. That's another thing with like a stutter. Don't try to correct them. Don't fill in the blanks. Just, and this might sound a little woo woo, but for me, when I'm with a person who's stuttering, I just kind of give them my little Care Bear stare. Like I pretend like I have like the happy Care Bear stare coming out at me. Like, and I'm just present. Like I'm here. I'm gonna send you some encouragement through my Care Bear stare and see if that helps. Just being present with somebody, not judging them. Because yeah, life moves fast, but does it really need me to move fast that moment? No. Provide extended wait time, model correct language. That drives me crazy when parents talk. I mean, I understand there's child-directed speech when they're little, but when they're like 12 and 14 and you talking like, okay, I want you to talk like this to them. You're like, no, stop it. Difficulty receptive language. Sometimes as adults, we just need to say it simple or make it more clear. Repeat instructions, that helps me too. One-step instructions, right? I've seen parents say, hey, can you get that thing out of the closet under that other thing? No. Hey, go to the closet and on the floor, there's a blue box. On top of the blue box, there's a green bag. Can you bring that, please? That's 3 steps, right? Not all children, even adults can get that, right? Or, hey, what did I just say? Repeat back to me what I said. Yeah. Mine can do that and still blow me off because he can think of like 10 things at the same time. Do one thing at a time. I do this thing that says do 3 and see me. He'll get all overwhelmed. So I'm like, just do 3 and see me. I'll help you with them. You don't have to do all of them. Just do 3. In fact, pick your favorite 3 ones. Pick your easiest 3 ones. And then you could see, let's say it's like a math worksheet. I say, pick your favorite 3 ones. And they just pick like the easiest ones. Like maybe they're just doing the adding. Okay, cool. The ones they pick less is the last is the ones that they have the hardest time with. So that kind of gives you a clue there too. Have a student's partner during activities. Have a buddy. Have a study buddy. Talk and reflect. Things like that. Pragmatics. I've had students walk up to me and be like, yo, teach, what's up? I'm like, I'm pretty casual, but I'm not that casual. So you can keep it to professor. And that's about it. And then same thing, you guys might have seen announcements from me. Please capitalize your I's in correspondence. College is not a text or Twitter or Instagram. So please keep it collegiate, that kind of thing. That's a pragmatic for adults. Okay. And again, modeling those things too. I make sure that I spell check all my stuff too, because I want to leave a lowercase I because I'm just moving so fast, but I just think that's meh. I could do that with my friends on my text, right? Early intervention. When we have kids with speech and language challenges, we just get in there early. It's okay. Most preschools know that that's going to happen, but they just keep an eye on it. There's different assessment tools that help with that. So again, This is the actual Sanders chart. This is the sounds of the American English language. So again, when kids are babies, they can say mama, mama, pa, 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 pa. Look at da, 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 da doesn't even come first. Not even close, right? Da, da, da is different than mama, mama, right? And then we're getting up in here into like T and n behind the teeth, n, and yeah, wow, s, ch, j, and z, v, o, a, e, j. Wow, look at this, 8 years old, 8 years old, almost 9. If you're saying my kid has a speech and language problem before they're 9, well, let's be more specific about that. Indicating when 90% of all children typically produce a sound correctly. Got to be comfortable until they're like 10. You know what drives me crazy is the but in, pay in. Did we drop the T? Yeah, I'm sure every generation has a issue with the following generation's articulation. But again, this is great to know. If you're going to be a speech therapist, this is your wheelhouse right here. This is your wheelhouse right here. And full alternative text, we can have, you know, this again, some kids are just a little bit slower, a little behind. Sometimes when you get children who are only children with older parents and the older parents don't talk a lot, the kids doesn't talk a lot. Or if you have a younger child in a big family, they either talk a lot to keep up or they don't talk at all because everybody else is talking for them. So culture has a lot to do with it as well. Pointing is a pre-language gesture. Kids who don't even point by the age of 1, that could be a little baby red flag for autism, right? So again, there's things like you just have to keep an eye on it, and every kid is a little bit different. Even this developmental milestones, I will test you on it, but I can tell you right now, outside of this book, these milestones have changed because of COVID. COVID has delayed almost every child. Think about it. We got COVID. Let's say you were learning how to talk and now everybody has their face covered up by a mask. You can't see their mouth. You can't see their intention. You can't see how their tongue works. You can't. So 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds are delayed in some of their speeches. Yes, their speech milestones. So anytime there's a test or quiz, I just pull it right out of the book. I'm not going to say, okay, well, the CDC updated these milestones like 6 months ago. It's not in the book. It's not fair. You guys have access to the book 24/7. So again, high quality early intervention. This is like speech, any sort of pull out, push in, anything that you can do to get the child on track earlier will make that window shorter. Now, my son wasn't diagnosed till 8 with autism, but he was diagnosed at 4 with ADHD. And so we worked on his sensory stuff here with the ADHD, and then it took a while for the autism to be right. So there's this piece where you can support your child. But again, therapists like to see that kids can copy, can match, can pick their favorite color, can identify by say, touch the green one, or hey, can you bring me a red block? Things like that. So that's, even if they're hearing you and understanding you, then you can get receptive delays out of the way, right? And then I'll say, what color is this? And I stop talking and they say, red. Excellent, good job. And then later you can say, red. So we did pirate talk, red instead of wed, and that helps. And scissors, things like that, My son does have a slight lisp, but they told me, yeah, I was pushing for it. And they're like, well, we don't need to work on it because we can understand what he's saying. And I was like, So now we've sort of corrected the lisp on our own. Again, language rich environments. It doesn't just mean TV. It means books. It means music. It means even playing music, like playing drums and shaking things kind of loosens it up and gets different parts of the brain working. And so, yeah, let's get them at the store, even if they have to wear a mask and they can hear people talking. Just talking to a child during dinner time, actually having dinner at a table, can actually help language acquisition too. Let's do dress up. Let's do practice. Let's go to the park. Let's meet different people and dogs and things like that. So whatever is safe, but also language rich is where you want to go. School years, same thing. We can, there are collaborative strategic reading, again, empirically based or evidence-based programs that help students learn their reading. So sometimes there's the phonics, or there's a whole word learning and things like that. You can prep them. You can say, hey, today we're learning about bunnies and bunnies who are friends. And so then the story kind of backs that up. Click and clunk. You could say, oh, what was a word that rhymes with fun? Oh, sun. So things like that will help them get more comfortable with language. And the more confidence that you can build now at the early parts, the better it is for the future. And then again, this is what a CSR learning log does. But now, guess what? If you work in a school, they're going to use different tools. So I don't really test on CSR, but again, these modules are fantastic. These IRIS modules from Peabody, Vanderbilt, very, very good. If they have a whole school for special education. Full alternative text. Sometimes kids need bigger words, or they need half pictures, half words. Again, language sensitive is the same as language rich. So you're using the right words. You're not too casual. You're modeling good language. And then again, right, instead of saying, do you get it? Say things like, do you understand the instructions so you can complete your homework? Right? Instead of open your book to today's chapter, say open your geography book to page 105. Just being more specific in your language. That can help, right? Especially when you're going to work with teenagers, are going to be like, you didn't say geography book. I mean, trust me, we call it the loophole. Well, you didn't say it, so I didn't know. It's like, okay, let me make sure all the specifics are in there. Again, there could be, these are some examples here of what students could be, some of their typical responses. But there are miscommunications sometimes. Sometimes students might sound like they're giving you attitude, but they're just confused, or they're embarrassed that they're confused. So be patient, be patient. And then every chapter talks about transition. Let's say you have speech and language, but you want to transition into high school and college, right? We have on our college campus and all college campuses and under the federal guise of public school, because community college is 13th to 14th grade, we can accommodate parts of an IEP, but we do it as a DSPS accommodations. So if someone needs more time, they need different ways to understand the book, note taking, mnemonics. That's why I try to do videos and try to make things silly. Oops, sorry. I just made that whole page huger, bigger. Again, so there's a lot of different tips and techniques that you can use with students, but it really just depends on what they need at the time. Full alternative text. Always, as kids get older, we should talk about self-advocacy. My son's gonna be 16 next year, can participate in his own IEP. He wants to go to UC Santa Cruz because he's got a Santa Cruz sticker on his bike. I'm like, a couple years in community college first. Right? So again, this looks like the student here in a transition team. So you'll have like maybe like parents, teachers, school psych, like transition counselor, like speech pathologist might be in there, X, Y, and Z. So anything that we can do to support that student in transitioning. And so I think that, okay, again, so we've moved on to, people in situations. So 510 and 511. I think this origins history should go first in the chapter. It's kind of weird. But let's get to it here. Speech and language disorders have been around for hundreds of years, right? We used to make fun of people. We used to say that they were dumb. There's a lot of mistreatment. And so it's really kind of interesting how things have evolved. And now, like language differences are pretty common. So again, this gentleman here, it was Smiley Blanton, opened the first university speech clinic at a University of Wisconsin in 1925, about 100 years ago. And so now it's called the American Speech Language Hearing Association, or ASHA. So if you were going to be an SLP, speech language pathologist, this would be your association. And then let's see here, speech therapists, speech clinicians, good work. It's good work to do. And then after IDEA, SLPs are considered related services. You don't have an SLP as a category. It's not a category, but an SLP can help anybody. Just depends on what the student's needs are. So again, SLPs can do push in, pull out. A lot of times it has to do with the musculature, right? So look, you're going to be doing things like this. You show the kid with a mirror where the tongue goes, tongue coolers, and then you're talking about, so that's a tongue cooler. Okay. So articulation. So SLP and teacher could work together as a consult. Classroom-based, the SLP could work in a classroom depending on the entire classroom. It could be a pull-out situation where you take a student out of the classroom, or a push-in where you work with 3 to 5 students in the classroom. Personal stories, this kind of is like at the beginning when it talks about Samuel L. Jackson's. There's some suggestions from people who say, I have these speech issues. Please be careful, be mindful, be thoughtful, be responsible, be helpful, right? Just be there and communicate with me. Ah, she's so cute. What a great advocate. Sarah Sullivan. So again, Future Perspectives talks about medical and environmental issues. We have all these different amazing things. So this boy looks like he's in a wheelchair, but he has this device to speak for him. They have now neural links, so devices can speak for them, but also like your eyes can type for you. It's pretty amazing. When we talk about the autism chapter, we'll talk about Carly Fleischman, she's nonverbal. She's has a very severe autism. But at the age of like 12, she started typing on a computer perfectly. And everybody realized we've been talking about her while she's been hearing us and understanding us. And now she lives alone, and she's an advocate, and she's got a podcast, and she's written books. And her first guest on her podcast was Channing Tatum. And Homegirl was flirting with him. As in, would you ever leave your wife? Yeah, straight up. She's hilarious. So medical and environmental intervention, again, there are some things that can be done for things like a cleft palate, multiple surgeries. So sometimes children are born this way, where the top of the roof of their mouth is open between their sinuses, and then their lip is just underformed. But the more you do surgeries earlier, the more you can see. So here you could see how it was connected, and then look at even the nose. They were able to fix the nose too. And so you have a little bit of a lisp here, right here. I mean, a pulled up lip, but they could have a lisp with their tongue or not. And that could be, you might not see anything or know anything at all. And when you meet a person when they're older, they say, oh yeah, I used to have a cleft palate. In different countries, sometimes they just abandon babies who are like this. Oh, so hard. But we have so much that we can do here in our country with this. Operation Smile, this helps people who need support for that as well. How can language impairments be prevented? Sometimes it's genetic. There's a genetic link. Sometimes it's a mutation. But aphasia has to do with brain injury. And so you can have like multiple concussions. You could have a neonatal birthing issue. I was born breech 1972. They didn't do C-sections back then as often. So they were pulling me out with like the salad tongs, and my head's messed up, and broke my mom's tailbone. It was like a big deal. So I do have a touch of aphasia that definitely shows up, and I'll talk more about it in the LD. It presents more like LD, but even writing my own name, I can forget the M. It's weird. So I just have like a brain hiccup, or like a little brain fog sometimes, especially when I'm stressed or tired or hungry. I'm like, ooh. That's why if you take a class with me face to face, I don't write on the board a lot. But I've also learned that, and I'll talk about it more next week, but next chapter, if I write cursive, it's better, but not everybody can read cursive nowadays. So it's kind of a funky thing. So chronic ear infections can cause issues, and not just deafness. If you can't hear how people are talking, how are you going to learn how to talk? Also, houses that are super quiet. A lot of times now in our modern society, houses are more quiet because everyone's on a device, right? Or people don't eat dinner together anymore. We've already talked about AAC devices, and this is actually a specialty in special education where you can just be an AAC person, a teacher or a specialist who just works with technology, and you come out and assess a child and see what they need, things like that. So it could be anything from a special pencil to a special computer, speech synthesizer, anything. Look at that. So she's got like some sort of special younger children need sturdy technology. That's right. Yeah, so different buttons, different things. She has spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, means that your nerves are kind of doing their thing for motor skills. And so it's interesting. I have a friend who does have, it's not severe, but it is spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. And she gets Botox in her like armpits and things like that because it will freeze some muscles and nerves instead of being so spazzy. Yeah, she's super sassy, super duper sassy frassy. She has a master's degree. She's like a friend that just you just learn so much from because she ain't taking it from no one. I was like, all right. She's like, I know I look drunk all the time. You'd be surprised. People hit on me all the time. I was like, yeah, I've seen guys hit on her. And she's like, not only am I married, I'm not drunk. And you ain't good enough for me anyway. Hot damn. Love it. So again, depending on what the student needs is what you service them with, right? So some of these apps here are a little bit older, but you can look at Proloquo. This is usually what the school districts use. Very expensive. It's like $300, $400. Goes on an iPad and you can program it with any word, any image, any stick figure. You could take a picture of their happy little stuffy, and then do you want stuffy? And they have to press the button for the stuffy. So things like that. You can change the language, you can change the words, you can change the voice. You can make it sound like a little boy, a little girl, make it faster, make it slower, make it with an accent, things like that. It's really cool. And then same things, full alternative text. This is like a mind map, right? So again, this is what I say. If people need this for notes, then do this. You don't have to write me a Roman numeral or bulleted list. If this makes more sense to you, this makes more sense to you. There are apps that do this now. There's mind map apps. And so Inspiration is one of them, but it's expensive. And then summary, it's everything we talked about. There's a difference between speech and language disorders, special education, how we service these students, where they're located, where they're educated, how common it is, how, what are some of the common commonalities, things like that. Excuse me. Well, people and situations, again, this has been around for quite some time. And future perspectives, we have a lot of technology that supports. And then this right here, Council for Exceptional Children. We have standards here, but I don't test us on those. But at the same time, this does follow what needs to happen for children like that. So let's take a pause for a second. Oh, I missed a chat. Sorry. Oh. Oh, bummer. Okay. Yeah. So if you need to go, I understand. I'm just going to record. I'm going to keep recording this, but I want to pause this for. Yes. So we're jumping into chapter 6. We're going to try to do a turbo version of this. But if you guys need to go, if I go over time, I'm just going to keep the recording. If you guys need to go, please go. But again, we talked about learning disabilities as the largest category. And I like how Whoopi Goldberg here is focused at the beginning. She's very open about her learning disability, and they are a lot more common than we can think, that we know, because especially you can't see an LD. You can't see what dyslexia looks like on a person. You might see a cleft palate on a person, or missing a finger or an ear or something like that, or somebody who walks with a cane or is in a wheelchair, but you don't see what does learning disability look like. And every learning disability, even though we have these big categories, they're different for everybody. Now, our book does this really good job about outlining the chapter and having like an overview or like a table of contents. I think they do a little too much of that, but learning outcomes says that we're going to learn about LD, we're going to learn about how it works into special education, people's situations, and future perspectives. That's how the book is lined up. Okay. So again, how do we define learning disabilities? Now you'll notice in our book as we move forward in the chapters, the specific ones about each IDEA category, there are different definitions based on who you ask. And so there's federal definitions, and then sometimes the bigger research people, they have their own definitions too. Okay, and then we'll talk about all these different pieces here, like the definition, the types, characteristics, prevalence, and placement. That's the same thing with every chapter. So that's predictable, which is nice. Okay, so learning disabilities. The nicest way to say it, or the most collective way to say it, is that it's a person who has an average or above average intelligence, but they have unexpected underachievement. So when we talked in chapter 3 about the multi-tiered systems of support and the RTI framework, you say, this kid's doing great everywhere else. He or she has friends and they're in sports, but when it comes to this one class, it's really unexpected underachievement. Like this kid is, okay, maybe this kid has a C. Kids with C's who are passing are not always identified well, but kids with a D or an F, if the rest of their classes are doing fine, you're like, oh, okay. So hold on a second. Yeah. Okay, my phone rings for spam all day long. I don't know about you guys. And so then if you look here, we have the IDEA definition. We have the National Institutes of Health, NIH. We have the American Psychiatric Association. So a lot of times, I'm trying to make this bigger. Oh, it didn't make it bigger. Sorry, it just made it smaller. A lot of times these definitions overlap. So if you think about it this way, IDEA is who's going to fund what's in the schools, right? National Institutes of Health looks at learning disabilities as a health disorder. If you had those lenses on, so let's look at this as a health. It says this up here, it says this is a process that keeps learning from happening, right? Because that's their job, that's their focus, that's their lens. National Institutes of Health will say there is a disorder that affects the ability to learn in different ways. APA, the American Psychiatric Association, gets very specific: inaccurate or slow or effortful word reading, difficulty understanding the meaning of what is read, difficulty with spelling, expression, numbers, number facts, calculations, difficulty with mathematical reading. And it doesn't really talk about writing in here, but we'll talk about dysgraphia too. Definitions of learning disabilities too. Again, here's NIH. Why is there, for dyslexia and dysgraphia and dyscalculia. So dyslexia is the reading piece. Either it's reading the actual word or understanding the word. It's the one where we say words jump around, but that doesn't always happen for people. It could just be letters. It could be letters that disappear. It could be a bunch of different things, just the way that person's brain is set up. Dysgraphia is the neurological disorder characterized by writing disabilities. Now, my son has that. It's all the pieces that we already know. Capitalize the first word, and spaces between words and punctuation. And this is a tall letter, and this is a small letter, and this is an underneath letter. He doesn't have pretty much any of those things. And then dyscalculia is math. It's a math disorder. If you ask yourself this, or if you know of anybody who's failed the same math class at a community college 3 times, that is a huge indication, right? I have a friend who's like, I took math 23 times. I almost had to leave that school district to go to a different district. I failed it so many times. Yeah, it's a learning disability that has to do with math. Yeah. And people just say, oh, I'm just really bad at math. No, you could have an LD with math. If that's the case, if that might be you, let's talk. I'll get you some support here on campus. It's okay. Then there's selected types of learning disabilities. We talked about those. These are the 3 big ones: dyslexia, dysgraphia, or dyscalculia. The biggest overarching term is specific learning disability. Specific learning disability. That just means any one of those 3. Okay. Let's see, full alternative text. Okay, so again, here's this IQ achievement discrepancy. You have a student who has an average or maybe above average IQ, but they're tanking it in math. And you're like, well, this is a smart kid. What's happening? Something else. And they've gone through the RTI tiers, and now it's time to get them assessed for an IEP to get some more support in there. Resistant to treatment, resistant to instruction. That means you've done all your bells and whistles and your bag of tricks, and it's not helping. It's not working, right? We've already been through the RTI steps, and they've gotten to the tiers, and it's not helping. The longer you wait to get more intervention, the bigger the gap gets. So as the rest of the kids are learning, this kid is like not learning. And if you let that gap get too big, then it's hard to catch up, right? One of the things that people misunderstand is that the kids who are working the hardest in classes are the kids who are getting a C or below. What? Wait, think about that. If math is easy for you, how hard are you working at it? If math is hard for you, how hard are you working at it? You're working at it really hard. So you could be working twice as hard as everybody else and still getting a C, D, or F. Is that fair? Not exactly. So let's get some extra support in there, okay? So again, here's this performance gap, right? Our typical learners are, let's say they're learning multiplication tables in the 3rd grade, right? And then we go into double digit multiplication. This guy still is not getting the regular multiplication table. So how can he move forward? And so this gap between here and here, even here and here, is hard for kids. right? Getting caught up. It's like the homework in this class. The further you get behind, the harder it is to catch up, right? So let's get some support in there. So again, this is another RTI measurement here. So this kid right here is this Emily is moving up. She had a little fallback here, but she's moving up, right? And look at here, this right here, this is Marco. This is where he was tested, the same as Emily, the same width, right? Tier 1, way down here. So then they gave him some interventions and it caught him up. He's at the same level as Emily, right? He's in the tier 2 interventions for the RTI. And look at this one. This is tier 2, but guess what? It didn't work. So we got to go to the next tier, tier 3, right? So again, there's nothing wrong with Josh. We just haven't figured out what he needs yet. Make sense? And Marco just needed some extra support and it clicked in. Have you guys ever gotten that with somebody helped you and then you're like, oh yeah, I get it now. That was this guy right here. Boom, boom, boom. This guy is like, no, I still have no idea what you're talking about. Slightly progressing. This is a little bit of an upward trend. So at least the intervention didn't make him go down because sometimes they get frustrated and they want to just bail. So there's that too. We don't want to push them so hard that they want to just give up. Yeah. Again, we talked about reading disabilities, writing disabilities. Yeah, this right here is better than how my son writes. Yeah. He says the mad scientist let his plan. I don't know what he's saying, but a lot of erases, a lot of, I can tell this kid is trying really hard, but it is challenging for him, right? Mathematics disabilities, just things like this. See how this was $15? They should have been over here, right? The 1 and the 5 should have been over here. So just missing the decimal point changes that answer big time, right? So little things like that. It could be ADHD. It could be ADHD with dyscalculia, right? So again, is there overlapping? Yep. You can get kids who are not good at writing and not good at math. So for me, my aphasia, I have a weird one. I told you I dropped the first letter of my name often. I mean, my initials are MMM, right? At least my maiden name was. But for math, I can do this stuff, no problem. But a 4 and a 6, I'll think 4 in my head and I know I need to write 4 down on the paper and it turns into a 6. I have things like that. I have, if I'm writing and I can't remember and I don't want to stop, I put like a little squiggle for a letter or even a word if I know how to spell it, but I couldn't spell it in that moment. Yeah. So I don't have the thing where things bounce around, but I have the thing where it's a disconnect between my brain and my hand. And so it has a little bit to do with a brain injury I sustained when I was being born. So I can tell you it comes out certain times more than others. Again, when I'm hungry or tired or stressed. And sure enough, it was in college when the college teacher reached out to me and she said, "Are you a native English speaker?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Well, I see that you have these symbols and squiggles and stuff like that in your page." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I didn't have time to go back and fix it." She goes, "I think you need some help with the SPS." I was like, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, just go talk to them." And I did, sure enough. And then I had other medical providers help me identify my aphasia. Yeah, but it is mild. I have to say it is mild. So it presents as dysgraphia, but it's more of a brain injury. So characteristics. And so ironically, I adopted a child with dysgraphia. It's really odd how that works, right? Visual processing. Again, some kids can see it on the board, can tell you what it says on the board, but when it comes to something else, they're not visually processing pretty well. Again, this P, D, B, and Q, I do have issues with that. M and N, I'm okay with, but that right there floors me a little bit. The 104, 140, 401, 410, that'll throw me off a little bit. But I'm really good about checking my work. I'm decent at math, thank God. Because if it was dysgraphia and dyscalculia, it'd be really hard. Auditory processing, this is my kid. He can hear you, but he's not really processing. And then if you just give it extra time, it works. And then this rapid letter naming, this was hard for him, especially it wasn't in order. You can give him worksheets like this, but if they're all capitals, he's faster. If they're all lowercase, he's faster. But if it's up and down like this, it's not as fast. But you'll see this, like how many you can do in a timed minute. You'll also see sight words in like the first grade. How many words can you read in a minute? And again, kids can be behind. Mine wasn't a really good reader until after Christmas. And so it just takes time, Decoding skills, we have to like break it down and give them little tips and tricks, right? We're gonna take notes, or we're gonna have a
Sorry,
picture.
teacher. I had to
Yeah.
say, sorry to interrupt you. I had to say this. So my son has ADHD, and then it's really hard for him to focus, right? But for reading, teacher, oh my gosh, he's the best reader. And I'm
Ah,
like, I know, and it's really easy for him to processing every word and then read like with so much fluency. It's amazing how he reads. But in math, he has problems, and all other classes, he's not the
well,
bad,
also, yeah,
deal.
also think about it this way. If you give a child, even you and me, something boring to read, we're gonna be like, but if you give him something engaging, and he's gonna be focused and he's gonna pick every word. Think about it, every word is like a little puzzle, right?
Yes.
Sounds, the shapes, the length, the syllables, the caps, the lower caps, the punctuation. It's a little code. And so you could have a kid who's really smart into code and decoding and like that kind of stuff. They can launch into reading. I'm a great reader. I just like writing it. I have a bleh. And then if
Same for him.
yeah, see, so that might be just a little bit of a brain hiccup issue. And then ADHD does it too. Listen, if you don't like the math, why do you want to like automatically be good at it?
Yes.
Nobody's
yes.
like, oh my gosh, I'm super horrible at fractions. But this is my goal for my, my 5th grade, that I'm going to be super great at fractions. Not many kids set those personal goals for themselves.
Yes. Yeah,
They're like, I hate fractions and I'm going to stay hating fractions.
When he focuses on one thing, but he needs to be really focused on it, because like then for him it's really hard, and then he looks like he's just blocking his brain, saying like, I can't do it, mom, it's too hard. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
like,
hard,
hey,
yeah.
relax. So and then at the end he's giving me all the answers and everything without my help, and I'm like, you see, so you got it, but
Yep.
it's just hard for him to focus. Yes.
I also learned that my son can do a lot of it in his head. So there was points
Mhm.
where I would scribe for him and he'd be sitting like under the table or like, far away from me. And I'd be like, okay, so what's, if it was like 37 times 462, I would just break it down. I would say, well, what's 30 times 4? And he's like, okay, well, that's 120. I'm like, well, what if that was 30 times 40? He's like, okay, that's a 1,200. So he could like talk through it and do it in his head. And as I
Yeah.
broke it all down, he got it. So there's different ways to work around things, but always let their teacher know. I literally said, I had no idea he could do this stuff in his head.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm agree
So,
with you.
and then also with boys and maybe fractions, sometimes make it into sports. I'm not saying girls wouldn't do that either, but you could say like, okay, Johnny tried to make 4 baskets, but he only made 1. That's 1 in 4 tries, right? What is that? What is his percentage? Right? So you can turn it into sports. You can turn it into coupons. You can turn it into cooking. Like if you have a child who likes to make cookies. Okay, well, this says it takes a quarter stick of butter, but I really want to double the recipe. What's 1/4 stick plus 1/4 stick? Oh, that's 1/2. Wow, you got it.
Yeah, that kind of work with him.
Yeah, you have to. And you know what, but also share that with their teachers, because the teachers need to know that there is an alternative way too. Because if they're trying to say it's my way or the highway, and I have to tell you, with Common Core, people freaked out about Common Core. Common Core is not the devil. Okay, Common Core actually opens the opportunities for alternative learners to pick a way of expressing themselves. It's giving more choices. So it's almost like the pronoun situation. It's giving people more choices in how to consider themselves. But with Common Core, it gives them more choices on how to show that they know, but they just in their own way. So again, Common Core was a beast when it got rolled out, and not all districts did it well. Not all teachers liked it. And sure enough, the older parents, but you know what? It is more equitable for the brain of today. It's better. It really, it's weird to us, but it's better. Right? See here, like, so calculate the sale price. And oh, by the way, I tell my son, go on YouTube and find a hack. Because there's always somebody who's like, well, 30% of 79.98 is also the same as 80% of, well, I don't know. There's all these little hacks and stuff. Go do those. Yeah. So again, this also talks about our memory. If we're trying to hold 2 things in our head, like, oh, if I'm dividing fractions, I have to flip one. Working memory is an issue here. Some kids with learning disabilities don't have working memory, or they do, but it's just fleeting. Right. And so I did decide to medicate my son at 7. I knew that the brain has a little growth pause at 7. They suggested medicine at 4, and I was like, nope. So at 7, we did give him a little bit of Ritalin. It helped a little bit. It's like a cup of coffee. Homie now drinks coffee with his Ritalin in the morning, but then he made me one after lunch too. So it's one of these things, as the body grows, you could change it and things like that. But it's not giving the people used to say, oh, it calms the brain down. It doesn't. If you here's the analogy. In a baseball game, you want to have one pitcher and one catcher, one pitcher, one catcher, one pitcher, one catcher. What happens is that when you give Ritalin, it actually the ADHD brain has one catcher and 5,000 pitchers for every neurological connection. So you're getting 5,000 messages. That's why they're so distracted. But what ADHD medicine, especially the Ritalin, it gets the one pitcher, it beefs that guy up with the right message. So all the messages are still coming, but the one message just gets stronger. Boom, and then it catches and then it goes forward. So it's medicine's not for everybody, but it did help us. And so and then again, everybody has differences. So there could be somebody with severe ADHD or that causes or is on back-to-back with their severe LD, or it could be a mild LD like mine. So it kind of just, so heterogeneity, this means that everything is so different. So hetero, think of man and woman, or homo is like 2 men or 2 women. But like heterogeneity means that everything is so different. You can't say, well, this dyslexia is like that dyslexia. Same thing with most of these things, like autism. Like you met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And so there's this piece where, because LD is so different in every single child, it can be a little nebulous. So again, here's prevalence. LD is the biggest one. And remember he said chapter 5, speech and language, 18%. Then all the other disabilities combined is 43. Whew. So LD is the biggest one. But remember, there's a lot of overlap here where a lot of the kids with LD may have speech and language issues as well, but their biggest issue is in LD. And so that's where it's categorized. My son has 3 categorizations. He has autism, OHI, and ED. Yeah, so it goes in that order. Yeah. Challenges and their solutions. Again, we talked about, that's kind of like the table of contents for this next section. Challenges and their section. So generalization is a great term. That means, like, have you ever taught a kid like maybe to tie their shoes, and you're at home and they put their foot up on this little red chair and you tie their shoe, and they tie their shoe and they learn how to tie your shoe. But when they get to school, they can't do it. They've only learned in one situation that's called ungeneralized or non-generalized skills. So it's almost like, it's like if you and I learned how to take notes in class, but then we got to some other place and we couldn't take notes. So here's the thing, you build the skill and then you put that skill in different situations and then they generalize the skill. So again, some kids with learning disabilities or ADHD or have a underdifferentiated frontal lobe, they may have issues in generalizing skills. So my son will tell you in therapy or in speech language, the thing you want to hear in social skills, he's got it down, but he can't really do it out in the world yet. And so we said, oh, we still need work on generalizing. Learned helplessness is really sad to hear in kids. Well, why should I try? Because I'm just going to fail at it. It happens. So we as providers and parents, we don't want them to feel that way. It's sad. Makes me sad. So again, more characteristics here, and then the challenges. So we have the general characteristics. Again, LD doesn't mean that they have an intellectual disability. Their average intelligence, maybe even above average. There's definitely unexpected underachievement. On the resistance to instruction, even your best thing, oh, we'll have a pizza party when you have a really good quiz at the end of the week or whatever. And it's like they just can't do it, right? Processing and working memory deficits. Then again, these will show up in academics, academic support areas, and social emotional stuff. It would be sad for a student who is like a well-rounded student who's doing poorly in one class to make everything else fail too. Right? Like social emotional, and as they go forward and like get into middle school and it's like, oh, you're in the dumb class. No, let's get that bias put aside. Let's get that support into place ASAP. Explicit instruction is me explicitly saying to you, okay, Johnny, come over here and grab your chair, pull it out, sit down and pull it in a little bit so you're comfortable in sitting and looking at your desk. implicit would be like, okay, everybody knows when you come into a classroom, you should be sitting down. No, we have to be very clear with students, right? And again, as teachers, when we reflect on how we're talking to students and what we're saying and how we're describing, I know we've all had teachers who were not so great, who said, you should know what you should know what you're doing by now. You're 13, you're 17, you should know by now. Well, no, sometimes people need more support. Learning strategies means like, how do you learn best? What time of the day do you learn best? Does it need to be before lunch, after lunch? It make sure you're getting enough sleep and hydrated and vitamins and all that business. Learning strategies. Do you like to talk to a friend? Do you like to listen to audio? Do you like to watch videos? Like, learning strategies are very, very helpful. And metacognition might seem like a big word, but my son's first grade teacher taught it to her whole class. Metacognition means that we can talk and think about our thinking, our cognition. So if I can say to you, what's your best part of the day to learn? For me, it's between 10 and 2. And then again, between like 8 and 10 at night. That's when my brain is the most active. So when we can talk about our talking, talk about our thinking, that's called metacognition. So yeah, it's not just a term for Facebook anymore, right? And so again, here's our characteristics, the challenges, and the solutions are UDL, remember, Universal Design for Learning, having the same curriculum for everybody with supports in place, the same for everybody. Differentiated instruction is needing different. You might need a smaller group. You might need one-on-one instruction. Explicit instruction, very specifically saying what you need. Learning strategies, those could even be graphic organizers, mnemonics, flashcards, anything, any technology. Accommodations and assistive technology. Accommodations can be more time, preferential seating, right? And assistive technology. Again, people might need an audio recorder, things like that. Okay, I think we can get this. Keep going, keep going. Again, if you guys need to go, this will be recorded and I'll post it today. Accommodations, again, with learning disabilities, it could be anything to help somebody with LD. Do they need a scribe? Do they need audio? Do they need someone to repeat it? Do they need to do everything in an audio format? If they could say, I can't really write down that the fraction is this, but I know what the answer is. Will a teacher take that audio as the answer? Maybe. Would it be better to have a scribe? Perhaps. It all gets written into the IEP based on what the student needs, but what the team can accommodate in terms of that. You can't say, oh, you need a scribe, but we're not going to provide it, or we're not going to give you alternative forms. No, it has to be provided. Let's see, advanced organizers. Again, listen, like if you take 110 with me, I give these like kind of like the outline of the class, but I put blanks in it and people can fill out. I do things like that. Because 110 can be a little esoteric. It's one of these things that we just talk about invisible theories all semester long. It's weird. Again, note takers. I've had people need note takers in this class. Digital pens are really cool. I almost bought one. Like you can write with a digital pen and it knows what you wrote and can read it back to you. I was like, but what if you can't read my writing? You can also like talk into the, it's crazy. There's some really cool stuff. Oral responses, again, I've had students who say, I'm not good at notes and my accommodations and modification says I need oral responses. They sit and record themselves on a video telling me their notes. If that's what they need, that's what they need. Okay. Again, we have presentation accommodations. The way the teacher presents to the class, can you do it in a way that the student needs? It could be verbal cues, it could be study guides, it could be a reader, it could be repeating key information, advanced organizers, digital text. The setting, do you need a different setting? Is the classroom too distracting? Do you need to, I don't know, things like, it just depends on what the student needs. For the student to respond, can they have a graphic organizer, increased time, oral response, note takers? Can they use, oh yeah, my son was doing during COVID, he had a spelling test and then they were like, he literally had somebody watching him do the test and he used the spell checker. So that was cheating. I was laughing so hard. He's like, what? They didn't tell me I couldn't. I'm like, spelling test. Oh my gosh. It was hilarious. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful. Again, we are not here to make education easier. Again, just because somebody has a disability, we don't need to feel sorry for them because that's not helpful. And even empathy is great, but we want to be able to actually help them learn. Just right, like in this class, I say like not too easy, not too hard, somewhere right in the middle, right? It's going to be super easy for some people. It's super hard for a lot of people, but somewhere right in the middle for the most of people. Okay. Early signs of of learning disabilities, you'll see that as phonemic awareness. They're not understanding that a PH is right. So they're just not rapid letter naming. They can't really do that, or they're just a little slow. Phonological awareness could be something like saying run versus running. Writing, they don't hold up. Like, even though my son has a nice tripod, he's always had a really good, nice grip, he still can't write well. Some kids just never have a correct grip, and that's only, some people can write really well with a different grip. Leaving spaces or no spaces between letters and words. Counting objects. One-to-one correspondence is one of the #1 issues in preschool that we look for. One-to-one correspondence. I have an apple and you have an apple, right? But now if I have an apple and you have an apple and we put it together we have 2 apples. That right there for a preschooler, we can tell if that's going to be an issue, because I have friends who have first graders who can't do it. And that's like, bloop, we got to get that one-to-one correspondence is like, that is the foundation for everything in life. This equals that, right? This is a key. It has a word called a key. That is a one-to-one correspondence. For math, it's counting, but our whole life is one-to-one correspondence. My name is Mary Ann, right? I'm a person, I have a name, right? So incidentally, in ASL, my name is this. It's M with glasses because I'm always wearing glasses. Or this, like that. So some of the kids I used to work with, they named me. People usually name you versus you naming yourself. I got grandpa, Marianne grandpa for a while. And I was, oh, your grandpa wears glasses too. I was like, okay, thanks. So it's cute. So key reasons to intervene early. Every time there's early intervention, you will mitigate the length of the issue. So let's say you caught your 13. So let's think of it like this. Would you rather teach manners at 3 years old or 13 years old? That's a positive skill to gain, right? This is a little bit opposite, but the same principle. If you have a child who's struggling at 3, do you want to put the intervention in at 3 or wait till they're 13? If you can get an intervention in as early as 3, you might not even see that issue past 5 or 6. When if you waited till 5 or 6, you might see that issue going all the way to 13 to 15. 75% of readers who struggle in the 3rd grade will continue to struggle with reading in high school. So you're telling me we can get help for 3rd graders so they can make the rest of their high school, the rest of their educational career easier? By the way, it should be before 3rd grade, quite frankly, right? High quality instruction, good teachers, people who are on it, parents who see it, parents who work with the teachers, parents who are involved, can prevent years of school failure. Yeah, it's really frustrating, but we got to be on top of it early. So school years, we talked about this, we have intervention, mnemonics, tips and tricks. So again, things like this helps all of us, right? This is how you remember. So mnemonics is like the acronym, or sounds like something, and you can remember the acronym. So Holmes is Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. Route. This is interesting. POW plus tree, pick an idea, organize ideas, which is TREE. Topic, sentence, reason, explanation, ending, write and say more. Oh, I like that. Maybe I should put that in on my tips and tricks for the essay on the exam. POW tree, I like that. And again, different learning strategies. My son has like these seeker paragraph, graphic organizers. He's like, I hate them. I'm like, but they've made you a better writer. And so things like that. Always when we're learning something new, they're learning about the ancient Egyptians and like, what do you already know about it? He's like, oh, my mom has a book and my mom has this, whatever. So we do know background knowledge. Like even I said in this class, like we know some of this stuff already. We've been around people with LD. It's in our society. It might be you, it might be me, it might be in their family, it might be in our classroom. But as everybody learns, again, that's universal design for learning says, hey, what do we already know about this stuff, right? develop the background knowledge. You have some background knowledge already, but let's develop that, discuss it, model it, memorize it, support it, and establish independent practice. And that's kind of homework a little bit. Not a huge fan of homework, but getting students to do things on their own. Like, look at this. So in this class, we develop the background knowledge through the videos, through meetings, through lectures, through everything. Then we talk about it. We have discussions about it. We have a discussion board about it, right? Sometimes in the discussion board, we talk about modeling that behavior or what we learned. Memorizing, we don't really need to do too much memorizing here because I think that's BS. You build as you go. Kids do need a little bit more of that rote knowledge. Supported is, guess what? Supporting doing more or finding more about what we're learning is part of the reflection. And this independent practice is part of the reflection too. So what do you want to know more about? How does this apply to your life? Things like that. So it's the same universal design for learning up here as it is in high school and elementary school. Transition, again, students will go to college. We have LD support in college big time here, big time. And again, if you guys need any additional supports at any time, always reach out for me. If I'm teaching this, why wouldn't I support you? Right. There are no IEPs for college, but we can do 504s here. Yeah, we just, again, whatever you need, you let me know. I have students. I've had students I had a student one time who self-admitted to a hospital for self-harm twice in one semester and still passed. Yeah, we can do this. It just depends on what you need. Or you can just come back next semester. It's fine. Transition for college, get your team involved. When you're 16, you can start doing that. Get your records together, look at your options, look at what school, do your research. Who has a good DSPS program, right? Who is supportive? I can tell you our director of DSPS right now used to be a high school principal and a school psychologist. She's got it dialed in. It's fantastic. So people in situations, LD has been around forever. And then there are other organizations out there. And just remember, this book's a little old. It's not quite 10 years old, but at the same time, there are more resources out there all the time. The 1920s, 1930s is when we kind of looked at what a learning disability was. And it developed through the 60s. And then we finally came up with the term of learning disabilities. And then there is this debate about process or product of aid. What's more important, the process of learning or showing us what you've learned? Sometimes I think it's both. Sometimes it's neither. Again, but curriculum-based measurement, meaning like, are you learning the curriculum? Let's do those probes that we talked about. Meaning assessments. Again, that RTI really helps figure out if this intervention's working. But again, CBM is important. Like it's that empirically tested and researched way to monitor in a very organized manner, so we know that we're looking at the right things at the right time. Recent advances, there's lots of technology. There are people who are doing a lot more brain scans. There's a lot of people talking about medication or even like topical brain stuff, or like even like neuron, like external things that, yeah, I had a friend who had something put in the base of his skull, like, to help with his seizures, but it also ended up helping his dyslexia. But he was a film editor, so that was perfect. He needed all those things. It was kind of funny. It was like, he's like, I actually need those skills. I can't read so much, but I can edit a film really well. And then there's always people who talk about fads or like, oh, take this vitamin or take this thing or do this yoga or whatever. It could work for some people, but it doesn't mean that it's an actual empirically based, evidence-based solution to any problem. So just do your research. It's okay to do biomedical and do some energy work or some healing or body things like that, or chiropractic, whatever makes you happy. I tell people, if it helps you sleep better at night, just try it. I've had people say that, I've had professionals at school say to me, oh, you just need to give him this essential oil. I'm like, you know what? It smells good, but we're not going to give it that much more credence. It smells fantastic, but I'm not going to say like, this is going to cure my son's ADHD. Right. So there is no cure. Oh, I've had a neighbor send me a card. She's like, I'm going to pray that his autism is cured. I was like, things like, again, personal stories. Look, there's a bunch of people, like guy who used to own Kinko's. I have money in Schwab. Like there's brain surgeons who are dyslexic. Just, they don't have to read as much. You'd be surprised. Yale has a Center for Dyslexia. iNational talks about like self-esteem, and it's kind of like a peer support piece here. Charles Schwab, understood.org is a great website. It started mostly for ADHD, but now it's for all kinds of disabilities. And it really breaks it down into saying, hey, if you don't know what this is, your kid has it or your parent has it, like, this is great. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. CAST is great. LD America, NCLD is good. Bookshare is great. I challenge you guys to find this book maybe on Bookshare. There might be, you know, I think that would be kind of ironic that if it wasn't. Wouldn't that be great? Think about it. So again, there's prevention. Can we prevent learning disabilities? Well, yeah, maybe certain brain injuries, but not exactly. So prevention is not so much as important here as we are coping and strengthening and building skills and moving forward. But again, iPads are great for things like that. If it helps bridge the gap between learning and not learning, let's use it. Yeah. So can it be prevented? Unfortunately, not really. There could be a different things that sometimes prenatal things. Again, alcohol exposure can be fetal alcohol syndrome, which lowers an IQ, can go all the way down to 60, maybe lower. That child's going to have a hard time learning for the rest of their life. So malnutrition or drug or illness, things like that, right? So also sometimes you'll get a twin who had less oxygen than another, and so there's a little bit of a disability there. Again, just keep a healthy pregnancy, and so you don't have to worry about. I had a friend of mine, she had 2 boys. One she was super crazy healthy with, and he's great. The second one, she's like, I ate one granola bar with chocolate in it. Look how he came out. I was like, stop it. My other friend, she's like, all I wanted to eat was Hot Pockets and my kid can't do math. I was like, your husband can't do math. That's genetic. Don't get all bent out of shape. So just come on, we're okay. We're going to do your best, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to keep going. Are there medical advances to prevent or reduce? Not exactly. But you can figure out with brain scans. And if you're interested, every once in a while I teach a brain class, and we do talk about brain scans and whatnot. So again, here's a DMRI. That just shows you where most of the action is here. So right here behind right in here where our ocular cavity is, this is where this green right here is how our brain, and this one here too, it's our visual cortex. So isn't that really cool? I have done an fMRI with my son just to look for, that looks for just topography like tumors. He's fine. Like a brain related disorder does run in his birth family. So we did get that checked out, but we were able to do a lot of that with blood work. He's fine. Yeah, when his mom died of a brain issue and his 31-year-old brother had a stroke. Yeah, we checked in on that. It was like, geez. Okay, appropriate assistive technology for LD. Ooh, there's lots, and there's more every single day. Here's the thing, people go like, oh, we need Proloquo. Proloquo is very robust, very cumbersome. If you don't need it, don't use it. Get something else, right? But when you go through the IEP, you can ask for an assistive technology assessment. Somebody who works in AT assesses your child. Lady comes out once a year for my kid. She's like, I'm trying to work on his writing. Like, his grip is great. What is going on? So I'm like, you're right. Okay. And then she works with the speech pathologist. She works with the school psych. She works with all the different people to put it all together. What technology does he need? By the way, laptops, danger. He's broken them, accidentally dropped them. He found ways around the locks and the parental things. Yeah. So technology is kind of a double-edged sword. So be aware of that. Again, it has to be easy. It can't be too frustrating if the kids has to learn what's in the class plus learn the technology. That's not fair. That's like double the work. So again, if it's not going to be a helpful device, don't use it. But again, check out understood.org. I think I put it in a discussion board later. This talks about AT for parents. Like, what do you need to know? Why do you need it? What can they learn? What can they not learn? Oh, by the way, if you do have it's in your IEP to have an iPad from the school district, you have to sign a waiver or you have to replace it if they break it. I had a kid who like seriously took one and like, an iPad and just like bent it. didn't break. He just bent it. I was like, yeah. And so that wasn't $50 to replace it. It was like $350 to replace it. But the software is another $350. So you kind of want to agree to that. But again, if it's too cumbersome, too problematic, do not do it. You can always give it back and say it's not going to work. So LD, you're going to keep in mind that these are average students who have that either one of two things. Their IQ is IQ achievement discrepancy or the RTI discrepancy, right? So if their IQ is fine and they're just not keeping up like they are in the rest of their classes in this one class, that's one way to look for LD. Another RTI, if they've gone up to the 3 tiers, that's another. Remember, because it's less students as you go up. And remember, as out of our whole student body, it's about 10%. And so, and then about 6 of those 10 are going to be LD. Yeah. So you're going to have in every class, these kids that kind of move up to the top, and then it kind of, that statistic remains true. So again, special education, we can service students, but it's so different for each one. We have a lot of options. We just have to dig down and figure out which one's best. People in situations, we have the right teachers, we have the right supports, we get early intervention, and future perspectives is technology and doing what you can, then CEC standards. All right, so we got through that one in about 35 minutes walk through.